Hmm. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, how are you? How's it going?
I'm doing well. Survived the day.
Yeah. How was the day?
It's been a good day. It's a long day, as these days have been, as we prepare for the class cutting that's coming in,
Uh-huh.
and of course all the adaptations that we do because of the pandemic as well.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for your time.
Good to be here.
Uh, we'll just wait for a few more people to come in.
Reggie, in the refrigerator, could you grab me a water? It could be one of the fizzy water, any water, something.
How much time you have?
How much time do we have? I think they give us 40 minutes, 45, 40
Oh,
minutes. So,
okay. All right, cool.
if you need more, let me know.
All right, cool. So when does school start back up?
Cool. Officially, the students come back on the second week of August, which will be the 12th. So
Uh-huh.
we're mid-August. Um, which is pretty soon. We're not that far, 3 weeks.
Okay. So all the staff start coming back in now?
The staff are here. The faculty are probably not here. Many of the staff in student affairs and admissions are here. Public safety, of course, the normal things that run the campus are here. We also have summer programs, so some faculty are here. Other faculty are doing research both here and elsewhere. So they're here, but they're not in classrooms, many of them right now.
Okay. All right. Well, you ready to get started?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And we have President Verret here of Xavier University of Louisiana, which I am a alumnus. Um, so thanks again. And I just have a list of questions, but I'm sure we'll get off topic a little bit, but let's just go ahead and start. And how about we just start by just tell us how's your experience been so far, Xavier?
So far, it's been now, when people speak of me as a new president, I'm not new anymore. I feel new and slightly used. It's been a while. Xavier is very much a home and very close to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to change many things. We had to put new things in place, do some things differently than before because circumstances change. But what we find a constant is the commitment of people to the mission, especially our faculty, who are commitment to making sure these kids graduate and graduate at the highest level. That means some great flexibility. And I think that's been one of the things that actually got us through the pandemic in a good way, that this faculty that was able to go the extra mile because it was in their nature, because to make sure students got the education they deserved, no matter what the circumstance were.
Right. Yeah. So, I guess coming in behind Dr. Francis, who had been there for so long, and then I think me personally, I feel like a lot of the alumni, people get kind of used to things going a certain way, and so I'm sure that may have been a challenge for you, but
It was,
over.
it was in a bit, but not an overwhelming challenge.
Right. So I would say you've been there for at least 6 years now.
Yes.
So in your first 6 years, what would you consider some of your biggest accomplishments?
Well, clearly, there were financial hurdles that we had to, and some of the financial issues were existential. For
Mm-hmm.
example, because of Katrina, we owed a little more than $150 million in debt from our recovery
Wow.
from Katrina. And that was, if we could not find a way of resolving that, would mean that we would have to do less and
Mm-hmm.
struggle and not have the freedom to grow and expand and do the things that we needed to do. So I think that biggest challenge was actually to resolve that loan and to have that loan forgiven by the federal government, which actually liberated Xavier in a big way. And at that moment, we were able to begin to look at what do we do, not just in deferred maintenance, but by building new programs as well. That was probably day one of my arrival, that we had to actually say, this is not something that we can look away from.
Right. And what about like challenges? Since you like, what were some of the
I just gave you a major. The other challenge was actually to begin to think about things that we had to modernize. That included our core curriculum, our gen ed curriculum at Xavier, which was a barrier in some ways to transfer students coming to Xavier because it was such a large number. It was probably at least the general ed curriculum was half of the required credits at least, and that was a barrier to students who were transferring from other students, so we were not attracting transfer students.
right?
The gen ed curriculum, I encourage the faculty to actually begin to sit down with the provost to review the gen ed curriculum and basically modernize the gen ed curriculum to bring it into the size range, into the 30, 40 credit hour range. And they were able to do that. And that was somewhat surprising given that my experience is actually revising gen ed curricula in my previous life at other institutions, was that it was a bone of contention among faculty, removing courses and things like that, because you're taking a course from my department.
Right.
That was a very difficult issue. Comparable to, I would say, Congress addressing Social Security, which is a thing to discuss.
Is that big of a deal?
Yes, it was that big a deal because remember, it is ownership of part of the basic education of liberal arts education. But what oppressed me is that what normally would take 2, 3, maybe years at many institutions, they were able to come to a consensus of what that should be in a year, less than a year and a few months.
Mm-hmm.
And part of their focus, and I remember these conversations as the faculty were voting on it, it was about what do the students need? It wasn't about what does my department need? That said something about the faculty that were able to accomplish that. And as a result of that, that's why you're beginning to see, you've seen some growth in the numbers of transfer students, and we've been able to enter into articulation agreements with community college systems, even as far as California, because Xavier becomes transfer friendly. That was in fact, that academic hurdle was an important hurdle for us to actually be able to actually create time for students to begin to take electives, because many students did not have time to take electives because they had to finish those courses.
Right.
It's about times to put another area of knowledge within your bag of tricks that you take into your life's work. And that was an important piece educationally for Xavier students. We're able to do that. Other challenges we had to, well, if you think of what we had to do recently in the pandemic, but before that, it was even to actually begin to think about modernizing our residential spaces, which we're beginning to do some work on. The dormitories and the residential facilities that you may have lived in St. Michael's, I'm sure, right?
Well, I was a local, so
So you did not have the pleasure.
But I'm familiar with.
You're familiar with it, and it could use an uplift, right?
Yeah, it definitely could use an uplift. Like
it probably needed an uplift when you were there too. So some of those challenges of being able to have the funds to do that, resolving our loan to the federal government was actually an important part of freeing us to be able to begin to do that in our master planning process, which we are doing right now in our master planning. I think the great things that we were able to do also were to bring new programs to Xavier that we have not had. For example, Xavier has the only undergraduate neuroscience program, I think, in any HBCU right now, the BS program. What we've been able to do in new programs, not just in the social science, but also what we are doing in the arts, what we are doing in data science, and also the new graduate programs that are coming up on Xavier in some health fields, for example. Not just we have the EDD in education, but also what you're seeing is the MA is a master's in physician assistantship, and what you're seeing is that our students are playing an important role in bring new representation and diversification within fields that where there's low representation of students of color, which means something that as we were developing this program, we had been discussing, but as we went into the pandemic, the idea of representation and trust became a major issue.
Right.
And these programs that we've begun and are continuing to grow is our service to the larger community.
Okay. You bring up the pandemic. So let's maybe go back a little bit, like when the pandemic started. How were you preparing for the pandemic? Like how was Xavier able to make it through the pandemic?
Xavier made it understanding that one of the key elements of navigating the pandemic is understanding that you are navigating through uncertainty. You never have full knowledge of what is around the corner.
Right.
But you can actually make educated estimations based upon what you rely upon your knowledge of this, not just the public health and the sciences, but also human behavior. But what we did at Xavier, I think, and somewhat because of my experience as a scientist, especially in immunology and biochemistry, I read certain press. Mm-hmm. And what occurred in early January, if you think in early January, the news of the first illnesses in Wuhan began to percolate, maybe as you were getting on your plane around the New Year's.
Right.
But later in the month, family-related, something important happened that spiked my attention. We saw the first cases that appeared in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia. And I said, this is SARS. We had gone through SARS. This is breakout from China. What we did was that at Xavier, and many of my colleagues at Xavier were surprised that I asked for this, but also outside, no one was paying attention to this in the same way. We called together the entire cabinet, but also their direct report that had to do with planning, and to set up a scenario planning session. So the last week of January, we did a scenario planning session. And we only did one question. If this virus that we had just seen break out of China showed up on our shores, could we continue education for our students in any effective way?
Right.
What can we do well, and what don't we have ready? Mm-hmm. So the scenario planning session, which lasted an entire day, breakout groups on student life. How do you feed students? How do you monitor health? How do you deliver programs and services, the education of a quality that we demand of ourselves? And that breakdown began to understand what we could do and what we could not do. And those things that we could not do, I said, what do we need to make those things happen? For example, what we did in early February was to begin essentially boot camps for faculty members. Some of our faculty were very fluent in using remote learning modules because they've been doing it. Others were not. Others were, they may have put their courses and grades in the system, but they rarely taught a class in the system. So those boot camps began saying, how do we do intensive training? And we continued that through the spring break. We also began asking ourselves exactly, if we had to go away, what would be the gaps? For example, the gaps that many of our students, as we learned later, did not have computers. Or if they had computers at home, they did not have efficient internet. So we would reserve funds to actually send out hotspots, and which we did with FedEx. Uh-huh. So when we actually pulled the button in early March to say, we are sending everyone home, right? We began executing that plan that we began working out for that scenario planning session. And in some ways, we were very early in doing this because we worried enough that it could happen. And I understand that my call for the scenario planning session became prescient because about 2 weeks later, we received a note that we had 2 faculty members who were in China who were coming back.
Oh, wow.
And then we were saying like that, okay, they come back. What do we do?
Right.
Then we began talking about what is the quarantine plan? How long should they be quarantined? So those issues came, we didn't have much time to actually figure out the playbook. So some of this, when I speak of working through uncertainty, sometimes we had to build the ship while we were rowing. Right.
No, I get it. Yeah, and I guess with your background, that probably helped out a lot. What about moving forward? A couple of questions. what are your thoughts about mandatory vaccines for students?
I think, first of all, we have already asked required mandatory vaccines for students, except for the exceptions that are required by law, medical exceptions, and also certain religious exceptions.
Right.
Required by law. But we are mandating vaccines. I might reverse your question, if I may, and not to be impertinent. What do you think about the right to infect somebody else?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
What do you think? Does each of us have a right to infect somebody else?
That's a great question.
That's the real question. Because what we're saying is that at Xavier, and I think that's one of the things that protected us, that I think our ethos as not just historically Black and Catholic was that we are beholden to each other. And therefore, when we began to see masking, you were not just masking in the early days to protect yourself, because we're not sure that masking would protect you.
Right.
But the data was that masking would keep you from infecting someone else.
Right.
So you're doing it so that you are not a danger to someone else. That's what we did. And Xavier students and faculty accepted that quite well.
Right.
That notion of we are requiring mandatory vaccination because of good science. One is that right now, 99.5% of all people dying of COVID-19 or going to the hospital with COVID-19 are the unvaccinated. So now the pandemic has become something about the unvaccinated, so that it's a very dangerous thing not to be vaccinated.
Right.
At the same time, you're able to transmit as an unvaccinated person to those few people who are vaccinated but are not protected because they're immunocompromised. They have effective immune systems. There are some of us who are like that, are immunocompromised. They should not be in danger.
Right.
So unless there is a good medical reason why you should not be vaccinated, your duty and responsibility to your neighbor is to be vaccinated.
Okay.
Simple as that.
So for the upcoming year, is there any consideration, or is there a possibility, let's say I'm a student and I really don't feel comfortable being back on the campus? Is there options for
there will be some options, some courses that maybe there are some courses that will be a little bit of distance, but not at the same level and scope as we had last year.
Okay.
So the option of having a full curriculum depends on the field and the major and what year you're in. Okay. So I would not answer it as a universal question that any student who wishes to stay home would have a full schedule. I could not guarantee that.
Okay. And what are your, as a scientist, what are your thoughts of the COVID? Do you think it is under control? Do you think it's going to get worse?
Not under control. Not under control, because if you just look at even in this state, but also in other states nearby much more intensely, what you begin to see is a rise in illness with a new variant which is much more transmissible, compared at least almost twice as transmissible as the one that emerged in March of last year. So it moves more quickly. In other words, remember when they used to say that 15 minutes is the outside in the presence of someone who's infected, right? Right. It's probably now 5 to 7 minutes. Okay? With the new variant. And this is probably because that's not been measured very well. But the transmissibility is much greater. What you're seeing is that many people who are unvaccinated, the vaccine is spreading much more rapidly through that population. We're less than half. And what you're seeing is that something is happening which did not occur in the last spring. You're beginning to see some serious effects of hospitalization among younger people. We don't fully understand what's going on there, but clearly, if you ask me, are we done with COVID? The answer is we're not done with COVID. We could be done with COVID if we had 80% of the population vaccinated. Right. But since we have, let's put it this way, since we have politicized our best defense against the pandemic, right? We're going to lose some lives unnecessarily. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's switch topics. So I'm big into sports. Like, I love sports, basketball.
What sport you play? You played here?
No, I didn't play there. So I didn't play at Xavier because I would have walked on, but I didn't even try out. But I probably should have played. I probably could have got Xavier a few championships during my time. Now, I may still. Do I still have some
But do you
eligible?
still play?
Am I still eligible?
No, no. Do you still play?
Yeah. Well, actually, I kind of gave up because I'm a plastic surgeon, and when I go out and play with these young kids,
You don't want to break these fingers, man.
they beat up on me too much. And so I just gave it up. I just gave it up. But I will tell you this: when I moved to Atlanta, I used to live in downtown Decatur. I actually coached the freshman team at the high school because I'm that passionate about basketball.
If I might give you a quick anecdote, a quick story about myself.
Go ahead, tell me. Let's hear it.
I played soccer in college. I played soccer,
Okay.
in college, and I played soccer even afterwards. I would pick up and also on club teams when I was in grad school. When I came to Xavier, there were some games and competitions at Xavier. In one game that I played, there was a team of faculty and staff against students, and different departments. And on one of those games, I blew my Achilles.
It's always the Achilles.
And and I blew the tendon, right? And it took me a while to realize what I'd done to myself because, dumb and stupid. It'll get better. A few days later, I should see someone. But to this day, Father Tito feels guilty because he asked me to play. I said, Father, it wasn't you. You didn't do it, right? You feel guilty. And then I said, can I play again? He said, no, the president cannot play.
Yeah.
I'm not let me play anymore.
That's a recurring theme. Like once you get past, I'll say like 35, 38, like playing sports, it becomes
and you still think you're 15 or 18.
Yeah, and it's always the Achilles, always the Achilles. But what I wanted to kind of like talk about is, when I was at Xavier, the only sport I remember them having was maybe basketball. They may have had tennis at the time, but now scrolling through my Instagram or I'm on a website.
Volleyball, baseball.
You're competing in baseball, volleyball, the basketball teams winning championships. You're moving up divisions. Like, how did this all come about? Like, what's really going on? Like, are we trying to go D1?
The answer is no. We're not going to D1, and probably not for at least, probably never. But I think the reason is because many students who come here have a love for their sports, okay? And Xavier, that you should pay attention to is also that these are really scholar athletes. When, for example, the center for the basketball team 3 years ago, who's finishing law school, but he was considering he's going for his MPH when he finished playing basketball, okay? Mm-hmm. That's not unusual at Xavier.
Right.
Or women from telling her coach she cannot come to play for this playoff game because she's making a presentation at the national meeting of her paper. That's Xavier. So they are scholar athletes, okay? So the idea of, if you look at the Grace Mary, remember Sister Grace Mary?
Yes.
Yes, Sister Grace Mary, the honor roll is named after her. And the honor roll, the number of Xavier students who are on athletes who are 3.0 athletes, it keeps growing, okay? So, but the idea is that we educate students who actually have a love for their sports and also have, and it's important that we're educating the whole person. If you don't think of the old Latin states saying, mens sana in corpore sano, healthy mind, healthy body, right?
Right.
These students love their sports. There are other students who love other things as well. And so it's part of that. We want to compete at the same time. All of our ADs and coaches understand that the first thing is about getting a student to get their degree and be able to go do what they want to do. Every once in a while, we may have someone who becomes a great tennis star or a great basketball player. But that's not, the goal is education and educating the whole person. So we want to have the range of sports that our students can engage in. In fact, soccer will be coming to Xavier very soon because many young people of at least of my son's generation, probably your sons, are playing soccer, right?
Right.
So soccer is coming at Xavier as well. And so,
I'm sorry. I was going. How do you think the athletic or a flourishing athletic department kind of benefits the university in grand scheme of things?
Well, it benefits us reputationally, but also it attracts certain students who would not have come to Xavier if they could not become a pharmacist and still play volleyball.
Right.
So they ask you, for example, it's the same way that I would say if I'm a clarinetist, right? I don't only I like playing the clarinet, right? And the fact that there's an opportunity to play the clarinet while I'm becoming a chemist or historian, right? Maybe you can choose this school versus the other school, right? So the idea that because many of our talented young women and men haven't played sports and enjoy their sports. For example, one of the that's becoming competitive, and actually we actually went pretty far, is our competitive cheer team. Many of our students who had cheered while they were in high school, right, are coming to Xavier because they want to cheer. And the first 2 years of cheer team, we've gone to finals. So not that was in the plan, but these students came here because they want to do this as well.
And so what do you attribute the success to? Like typically, just from my experience with sports, like usually when you develop these programs, it usually takes some time before they kind of like mature and you start winning. Like why has it been, how have you been able to attain success in such a short period of time?
Coaches, great students. Great coaches, great students.
And how do you get the great students? How do you compete with other HBCUs or PWIs to get? I mean, you're all competing for the same pool of applicants. How are we able to compete?
The one thing that we are able to do is to tell our story, and we don't have to make it up here. We tell our true story, and one of the challenges that I had coming in as the new president was that Xavier was doing great things, right? But every once in a while, I would get a letter on my desk. For example, there was a gentleman who sent me very, I won't mention his name, but it was a very wealthy individual, sent me a check code of $30,000. It showed up on my desk somewhere around this time, maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The office was empty. I opened it, I looked at it, and a note. And he said, I read this article about Xavier. I'd never heard about you. And then he had this strange impression because he was coming from the north. He said, I never knew there was anything good in Louisiana until I read this. Okay. And he sent me this check. So I picked up my phone, I called him, and his wife answered the phone. And she said, oh, let me call my husband. We were talking about this, so we sent it. She said, we're reading about you. We had to let you know that we noticed you. But then and at the end of this call, you know what he said to me? What surprised me? How come I never heard about you?
Wow.
When that happens to you once or twice, you say, like, remember that movie Field of Dream? You think they know about you, but they don't know about you. But no one, because you know about you. Person next to you knows about you. But the people who really need to know about you may not know about you. So we did a lot of work, if I remember, to really get our story out.
Branding is marketing is branding.
As with you is to make sure people knew about us who did not know about us.
Right.
And very often it's the mother or father or grandmother of a young man or a young woman who's about considering college in their junior year, right? Who needs to hear about Xavier. Say, have you considered Xavier? For example, this is, and I'm not bragging because it's just a fact. If you go to I'll take one of the very good 4-year colleges outside of Philadelphia. I won't mention the name, okay?
Okay.
But you can pick on the ones I would think about. Excellent 4-year colleges. They send their graduates to some of the best graduate schools and other. If you are pre-med and you want to get to medical school, and you go to one of those schools, or you come to Xavier, the likelihood of you're getting to where you want to be at Xavier is much greater. No brag, just fact.
Right.
But nobody knows about that.
Well, a lot of people
So
do.
it's my fault, it's our fault for not making sure they hear about us.
Right. True.
So we worked hard at that, and we've been telling that story. The stories of high expectations of Xavier. That we have our faculty embrace students with very high expectations, and basically that's a challenge that says that you'll discover the things that are your weaknesses early because the faculty are going to confront you with it, and then they'll help you. Now let's work on this to make sure that you're not that you will be ready when you leave. That's been a concept of this faculty. The other thing that the world needs to hear about is that if you think about the Xavier contributes to economic and social equity through social mobility. The fact that Xavier, when one looks at all American colleges and universities, and the studies that were done by the Higher Education Research Institute in California and others as well, other studies looking at social mobility. When they look at universities for students who are in the lowest quintile of the socioeconomic bracket, their families are, who when they finish school within 5 years migrate into the upper 3/5. And they look at, and when one listed the top 10, it was written up in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal as well. When they listed the top 10 universities in that study, right? Xavier was 6th in the nation. And sadly, and I say sadly, we are the only school in that list of top 10s in the Southeast, in the Southeastern states.
Right.
What I call the old Confederacy.
Most people probably don't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but we've been telling that story to make sure people understand. We've been promoting that, and now I'm telling you, and then you should tell everyone you speak to about it. But that's the kind of, so when we speak to families, also friends, people also recommend others to consider Xavier. They must hear that basically at Xavier, we push you, you accomplish, and you will be transformed. And that story is quite true. Some others doing branding and marketing at other universities, they may have to make up their stories.
Right.
We don't have to make it up because we just have to say, this is it.
Facts. Yeah. So
just fact.
I think the athletic department, all of that's all part of the creative.
And the fact that our athletes, they graduate.
Right.
They're scholar athletes.
And they're winning.
For their years. That's the piece. That's a story that, for example, our baseball team, our latest one, I think that's your fellow Atlantan who passed away just recently, Hank Aaron, had been nudging us for many years. What do you do about baseball? What do you do about baseball? And he's been working with us. And he passed away only weeks before our first game. God bless him. Hank has been a friend of Xavier. The Sultan of SWAT looked to see how we make sure that there are African-American athletes coming out of HBCUs. One young man who in our first team, right, was already accepted by several other teams, recruited by other coaches, and he was planning to go to a school in Alabama to play. And he heard about the Xavier baseball team. He calls us, is this true that there's going to be a baseball team in Xavier? When I spoke with him at the first game, he said, I said, why did you choose Xavier? He said, my goal is to become a surgeon. I heard you had a baseball team. I said, this is it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
But that option, so you understand that it's our athletics, it's also our academics, it's even also the culture of service. I would say that you were pre-med here, that there's almost a Marine ethos that basically we don't leave any man or woman on the field.
Right.
We support each other.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, so, most people, when they think of Xavier, they think of pharmacy and pre-med. What kind of efforts are being taken to kind of open up the market or open up the school to those other academic programs? We've been
one of the, in fact, if you meet the provost of the university, who herself comes from modern languages. I am a scientist. It's important that we have a concern to actually grow the non-sciences at Xavier, non-STEM fields. So we've been doing for example, if you look at what's happening in mass comm, but also even our neuroscience program was to actually leverage something between the social science and between the behavioral sciences and the life sciences. It has taken off. It took off very quickly. But also what we're doing in data science, moving what is computer science tends to be hardware and software directly, right? Where data science is a field which has applications clearly in health, but also clearly in business. Has applications in any of the social sciences, in any of the what I call the population sciences, including public health. So the data science program is growing between that, but also in the pure humanities, what you're seeing, the digital humanities initiative that we've put together at Xavier, with some funding from the Mellon Foundation, is now established at Xavier, but also moving forward in what we're doing in the arts, and we'll be doing something at the graduate level actually in curation, especially of African of work of art from what I call the larger African diaspora. I think by that the African diaspora I'm saying from Africa, Tierra del Fuego up to Nova Scotia.
Okay.
So we are doing things that are not just in the sciences, but also what you're seeing is that there's an ability to leverage things that actually, not assuming that there are hard borders between the STEM fields and humanities and the arts. For example, I'm minoring bioethics, which I'm pushing. I'm diligent to actually create a full major in bioethics, right? I shouldn't say bioethics, in ethics of science and health, right?
Right.
Is really between ethics is really grounded in the social in the humanities and philosophy, and also in theology, and also in social sciences,
right,
with some experience in the sciences. But it really creates a bridge between those fields for students who actually see themselves doing both. And even in our pre-medical program, in our conversations with some of the medical schools, the pathway for students who are majoring in the humanities who want to go to medical school, especially as we've been in conversation with Mount Sinai's trackway for students who are coming from the humanities and the arts in medical school. We've been having conversations with Dr. Butts and others as well, as to how we allow and create tracks for students who may want to major in the humanities but want to go to medical school.
Right. Okay.
So we are growing, but clearly I think there's also national understanding as well of the value of those fields that we have to work with, which doesn't begin just at Xavier.
Right. So on that same token, how do we continue to be, how do we ensure that Xavier remains preeminent pre-medical undergrad for students, as well as for pharmacy school?
Well, I think part is to make sure of the level of our educational infrastructure.
Uh-huh.
The professors, the classes we teach, and how we mentor students, but also to create pipelines for students to understand why the pipelines before they aspire to college. We have some work that we have to do outside of Xavier.
Right.
Actually encourage students to understand what their pathways are, even to help their parents. But some of the other pieces that are important actually is monetary. That given that the communities from which we are drawing students are some of the poorest communities in the United States, there's almost a fivefold differential between in wealth between African American families and majority families. These are not wealthy students, so we need to help them afford education at Xavier. That even though our tuition at this point is about 2/3 that of our peers nationally. I mean, those great four-year colleges. Xavier is considered one of the best educational bodies in this country by the Princeton Review. Even then, it's a hard slog for many families who are not wealthy. So we need to increase our endowment, to actually be able to support need-based scholarships, not just scholarships for the students who have stratospheric ACTs or SATs, right? But for that good student who has a 2.8, 3.0, right? Right. Who deserves a Xavier education and should be supported.
And so how do you get the alumni to be more active? Like I mean, for most of my time after I graduated, I was studying, and I was broke. I couldn't really.
Those first few years after school, those are not your years, your biggest giving years.
It takes a while. It really takes a while. And then as a student, you don't like homecoming really, it didn't really mean much to me. Like until I graduated and I came back years later, you get to see all those people that you went to school with. It's like a family reunion.
I think part one is that you see the results of Xavier education by looking at those who went to school and graduated and see what Xavier did to them.
Right.
Now, I guess the communication with the alumni is also to allow them to see and engage with the students who are currently here, those who are just graduating, to see that they are the promise of this new generation, this new cohort generation of students coming through. And that communication of seeing those successes is that we have work to do to communicate to the alumni and communicate to the larger alumni community, because not every alumni at your stage of the career, folk are busy.
Right. Yeah.
They're
Like
busy.
very
You don't
busy.
have, but so we have to get information to you to say exactly. Right now, for example, the fact that we have a number of students who are going off to their PhD programs in neuroscience, in chemistry, who are then going off to interesting medical schools. We need to help share those success and those stories, because that encourages the alumni to think about that. How do I support that? I mean, we also need to be very prescriptive as to how you can be helpful in modest ways and eventually in larger ways.
Right.
Because, for example, the way that the emergency fund that we created for really with one narrow focus to say we want students in their third or fourth year who are in good academic standing, who are challenged by something. My father lost their job, many things, a major catastrophe that they are commuter students, but their car is dead.
Right.
Whatever those things that may become a barrier to their finishing, because getting close to finishing is not good.
Right.
Getting right over the finish line is good. So how do we get them over the finish line? To say that there's room for modest giving, either to give love and others, to fill that emergency fund that allows us to actually meet those needs, to make sure that we don't lose that young woman or man. So there are other things that we can do that are small but that grow into large collectively into larger efforts. The other piece that we need to do is that we need your help as alumni, and I'm talking about collectively, to find our lost sheep. People go off in places and they've been out of contact with Xavier. We don't even have a good email for them sometimes.
Right.
Because they're South Dakota, wherever. I'm picking a place. It could be New Jersey for all I know. But the idea is that how do we actually? But we meet each other at airports. We run into friends eventually, right? To actually help us get back into contact with our lost sisters and brothers. So there are major efforts, because collectively the alumni are an important giving, and also not just giving, but also they tell our story in places where we cannot be.
Right.
So we need to share the stories, like the social mobility piece that you say you didn't hear about. We need to share that with you, so that when you are in some place, somewhere, you tell our story.
Right. This is very true. And I think one thing from my personal experience is the communication, like keeping there has to be a connection between the alumni and the university, and the alumni and the students. Like me personally, for example, I've ran into a couple of students who were pre-med, and they reached out to me via social media and said, "Hey Doc, can I come and shadow you?" So one student started. His name's Ramel. Ramel's actually about to start medical school at Drew. And so what he did is he then told another student. Now this other student isn't a Xavier undergrad, but nevertheless she goes to Howard. So she came.
She reached out to you.
Yeah, she reached out to me because she knew him, and it's kind of just started a cycle. And now I have a kid who is currently a surgical tech that wants to go to med school, and he just from being in the room, he realized how much more Ramel was prepared to go into medical school, because everything was in place for him. And so basically, the other student is just kind of duplicating what he did.
And part of that is also that Ramel was pushed at Xavier in ways that not every student gets pushed, because the assumption that when a faculty member sees you or young you at Xavier, right, they act like they do believe in you, and they act accordingly.
Right.
So if you're slipping, they will push you.
Absolutely. Well, cool. I really appreciate it. I think I have a few more questions, and I'm not going to take up much more of your time. So since you've been in New Orleans, I just want to know, I mean, you can't be in New Orleans and not love the food. Give me four of your favorite restaurants.
Oh, restaurants. There's a new restaurant that just opened about 6 weeks ago, Fritai. This young man who had opened a stand in the St. Roch's Market, and his
Uh-huh.
dream, this kid's from Boston. He had opened a stand in St. Roch Market about 4 years ago, and his dream
Uh-huh.
was to open a restaurant. He finally opened the restaurant. It's really good. You should try. Fritai, it's on Basin.
Okay.
On Basin Street. There's a Tunisian restaurant on Maple called Jamila's Cafe. It's to die for if you like lamb and anything and tagines. It's that good. And it turns out, remember when I went there one day early, this was several years ago, and we're talking. Eventually, I noticed that the owner speaks French. Was speaking French, and he mentions it. And I mentioned to him, Xavier. He said, "Oh, my son is a third-year student in pharmacy at Xavier." And so it's that good. I love Dookie Chase. It still breaks my heart because I miss Leah when I go there, but the
Uh-huh.
food's still good. Another one that I'll say that if you go to, there's a Vietnamese fusion place called Cafe Min off Canal.
Okay.
Of
So
Canal. It's worth Cafe Min is actually it's not Vietnamese per se. It mixes a lot of the, remember New Orleans is about those traditions kind of that do this
yeah.
and and, and you'll see this. Good restaurants is Xavier. Good restaurants in New Orleans, but I can't say favorite restaurants because I don't repeat very often. I come back in maybe 6 months.
Okay.
A lot of good restaurants here.
Okay. I got you. Um, all right, this is gonna be my a couple more questions. So, president of a university, President Xavier University of Louisiana. What's what's like a typical day like? Like what's your day like?
Typically, there's some scheduled meetings, but then there are also meetings to make decisions on things that are emerging. Like
Hmm.
it could be that because there, as I scan my email very often early in the morning, there might be a student concern would come to me as a CC, but then I need to check and make sure that it was followed up on.
Right.
So that's my early email. I'll scan my email, and I scan my email several times a day. Don't assume that if you send me an email at 10 o'clock in the morning that you'll be answered at 10:30 because it may not be until 2 o'clock that I go back to my email. Uh, so email and making sure that we're not missing anything, but also meeting and having conversation with some of my team sometimes because we will discuss situations that we're planning. A lot of that is also coordinating to make sure that sometimes many of the things that we're concerned about require input from several sectors of the university. For example, same way that we talked about, I think, testing for COVID, right?
Right.
Required IT. IT played a big role in making sure that we had the testing lab running. It wasn't just the faculty in pharmacy and biology who were playing that key role. So there was really a student health piece from student affairs that had to which how we get students tested and the logistics of having it done. So many pieces. So we're having conversations across to make sure that and so I want to hear that we're making that progress. The other piece that during the last year, a lot of it has been reviewing our situation to make sure that basically we're adapting and changing things that we may need to do. For example, it's about our policies. Do we actually need more resources because the pace of testing is not getting us fast enough? So making decisions as to how we adapt has been important. A lot of that is also hearing from my staff of where are the emerging challenges that we're facing. Some of them may be curricular. Some of them may be we're missing enough staffing to answer our phones and as we're getting students back in. Those are things that we're tracking as we go. and prepare for emerging. Our facility is going to be ready in time. Those are things I need to hear about because in 3 weeks the kids are here. So there time. I also find that I need time if I need to write something, where I'll tell my staff and say, unless there's a fire or something horrible is happening, I'm closing my door for 2 hours.
Okay. Wow, you can close your door for 2 hours. That's pretty impressive.
And that doesn't happen often, but basically sometimes if I need to write something, I need time away.
Okay. All right, cool. Well,
And sometimes one of our former students, Mark Veal, tells me I have to do an Instagram with you. And he tells me
yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I just sent you an email,
and I tell you, Mark, who's actually doing coordinating all this, was a student here only 3 or 2 years ago.
And did Mark respond to that email, or you personally responded to that email?
I think the email, I first passed it on to Ms. Reyes in our communications team.
Okay.
To make sure, because I don't own my schedule. I'm not allowed to schedule myself. You understand?
I see that.
They don't let me play with dangerous toys.
I got it. So, last question. Who do you have winning the NBA Finals?
Actually, I can't say. Haven't been paying enough attention to it.
Okay.
I know the Bucks lost, and Atlanta. I'm sorry to hear Atlanta is not going well.
I don't care about Atlanta. I'm from New Orleans.
You're from New Orleans, and I'm torn because the Knicks and the Nets are playing. I'm a Brooklyn kid, but I do enjoy the Pelicans. And I go to see them. I'm torn. I lived in Atlanta. As well. So I've drifted enough that I enjoy the teams. The only team that I rooted against that I lived in was with the Celtics.
Oh wow, yeah.
So when I was in Boston, I rooted for the Knicks because that was my home team, and any team playing the Celtics.
Yeah, me too. I was never a Celtics fan. I didn't like them.
And that was when Larry Bird was playing, so they were a good team.
Same thing. I have the same passion about Duke and Boston for some reason. I can't explain it.
It's in the blood.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for your time. I enjoyed it, and just
thank you for doing this.
Yeah. This was cool. I really appreciate it. I learned.
Go tell the story.
I'm gonna go tell the story.
A good story.
So is homecoming? Is it official?
Homecoming will be unless you're a physician. Unless we really don't behave in this country and let the pandemic run over us, homecoming will happen. Yes.
Okay. Good.
Yes. The details we don't have it yet.
Okay.
We don't have the details. There will be homecoming this year.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, thank you, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Bless you.